You blow out the candle. The room goes completely dark. Not dim, not shadowy. Completely, utterly black. You can't see your hand in front of your face. You pull the blanket up and wait for sleep. For most of human history, this was every single night. But here's where it gets interesting. Medieval people didn't just lie there waiting for morning. The hours after dark were their own world, with their own rules, their own dangers, and their own rhythms. And those rhythms look almost nothing like yours. Let's start with the reality of darkness itself. Before electricity, before gas lamps, before anything that could reliably push back the night, darkness was total. A tallow candle, the cheap kind most ordinary people could actually afford, gave off about as much light as a birthday cake. Beeswax candles were brighter and burned cleaner, but they cost real money. A poor family might burn through their weekly candle budget in a single evening. So most people didn't. When the sun went down, you had firelight if you were lucky, and nothing if you weren't. The dark wasn't atmospheric, it wasn't cozy. It was a physical force that shut down your world every single night, right on schedule, whether you were ready or not. Now, some of you are probably thinking that people just went to bed when it got dark and woke up at sunrise. That's the obvious conclusion, and it's wrong. Here's what actually happened. Historian Roger Ekirch spent 16 years researching sleep patterns in pre-industrial societies. He found references in diaries, court records, medical texts, and literary sources from across medieval Europe pointing to the same thing. People slept in two separate blocks. They'd fall asleep shortly after dark, what sources called the first sleep. Then, around midnight, they'd wake up. Not because something disturbed them, not because they had insomnia. They'd simply wake up, the way you might wake up naturally on a morning with nowhere to be. This waking period lasted roughly an hour, sometimes two. Then they'd fall back asleep for a second block until dawn. Ekirch found over 500 historical references to this pattern. It wasn't unusual, it was normal. It was just how humans slept before the modern world told them not to. So what did they do during that middle-of-the-night window? It depended on who you were. Some people prayed. The Catholic Church structured its liturgical hours partly around this pattern, and monasteries held night offices, prayer services, during exactly this period. Monks weren't fighting their biology. They were working with it. Ordinary people used the time differently. Couples talked. Some had sex. Medical writers of the period actually recommended the waking interval as the ideal time for conception, on the logic that both partners were rested and calm. Some people just lay there and thought about their debts, their neighbours, their sins, their plans. There were no screens to reach for, no distractions, just darkness and your own mind, which sounds peaceful until you remember what medieval people believed was sharing that darkness with them. Because here's the part that's easy to underestimate. The medieval night wasn't just dark, it was populated. Demons, spirits, and malevolent forces were not metaphors to a medieval peasant. They were operational beliefs. The night air itself was considered dangerous, miasmatic, corrupting, capable of carrying disease and evil into your body through your skin and your breath. Nightmares weren't stress responses. They were demonic attacks. The word nightmare literally referred to a creature that sat on your chest while you slept. Before going to bed, people prayed extensively, not casually, intensely. You were about to spend 8 hours defenseless in a world that was actively hostile after dark, and prayer was your armor. This colored everything about the nighttime hours. Waking at midnight wasn't just a biological event. It was a spiritually charged moment. Some people lit a small lamp and continued praying. Others refused to move at all, lying still in the hope that whatever was in the room wouldn't notice them. Going outside at night was a different problem entirely. In medieval towns and cities, darkness changed the social contract completely. Most urban centres had curfew laws. The word itself comes from the Old French couvre-feu, meaning cover the fire, a literal instruction to bank your hearth before a certain hour. After curfew, the streets belonged to a different category of person. Thieves worked at night. Criminals worked at night. Watch patrols moved through cities carrying lanterns, and if you were caught outside without your own light source, that was suspicious by definition. What honest person needed to be out in the dark with no lamp? You didn't need to commit a crime to be treated like you had. Just being outside was enough to get you detained, fined, or beaten, depending on the city and the mood of the watch. Rural darkness was its own kind of dangerous. Wolves were real. In medieval England, France, and Germany, wolf attacks on humans and livestock were common enough to require organised hunts. Walking between villages at night without a torch meant risking actual predation. It also meant risking your footing on roads that were, at best, packed dirt and, at worst, rutted mud with drainage ditches on either side. People fell into those ditches, people broke legs, people died of exposure. The night outside was not a place you went casually, so for most people, after dark meant inside. And inside, if you had enough light or a decent fire, the evening could actually be enjoyable. Households gathered around the hearth. This wasn't symbolic family time, it was practical. The fire was the only heat source and the only reliable light source in the room. You sat close to it, or you sat in the cold dark. And gathered around that fire, people talked. They told stories. They sang. They argued about neighbours and harvests and local gossip. Travelling performers moved between towns, and if one passed through your area, an evening's entertainment might include jugglers, musicians, or storytellers performing by firelight for whoever could squeeze into the tavern. For ordinary households, though, the entertainment was homemade. Someone knew a song. Someone knew a story. You told it again the way your parents had told it, the way their parents had told it before them. This was how culture moved through communities. Not through books, because most people couldn't read, but through repetition and memory and the particular quality of a firelit room at the end of a long day. Taverns had their own nighttime economy. In towns large enough to support them, taverns stayed open after dark and provided light, heat, ale, and company to anyone who could pay. Dice games, card games in the later medieval period, and various forms of gambling kept people occupied and occasionally got them stabbed. Church authorities periodically campaigned against tavern culture on the grounds that it led to exactly this kind of outcome. It mostly didn't work. People liked sitting in warm, lit rooms with other people. That hasn't changed. The wealthy experienced the medieval night differently in degree, if not entirely in kind. Noble households had more candles, more firewood, more servants to maintain both. A great hall with enough torches burning was genuinely bright. Feasts stretched into the night. Musicians played, jesters performed. Lords and ladies stayed up late in ways ordinary peasants physically couldn't afford to. But even the wealthiest medieval household went to bed earlier than you do, slept in 2 phases like everyone else, and woke in a darkness that was absolute when the fires burned low. The segmented sleep pattern didn't disappear all at once. It eroded. In the late 1700s and into the 1800s, gaslighting made it possible, for the first time, to push back the night cheaply and at scale. Streets were lit. Factories could run after dark. The logic of a single consolidated sleep block started to make economic sense. If there was light and work available, the hour between first and second sleep became waste rather than ritual. By the mid-1800s, references to first sleep and second sleep had largely vanished from common usage. Sleep researcher Thomas Ware ran a study in the 1990s where he removed artificial light from participants' environments for several weeks. Within a month, almost all of them reverted to the 2-phase pattern spontaneously. They hadn't been taught to do it. Their bodies just remembered. So when you wake up at 2 in the morning and lie there staring at the ceiling, unable to get back to sleep, there's a reasonable chance you're not broken. You might just be running on a schedule that's about 800 years old, waiting out the quiet middle hour the way people always did, before the modern world decided that was something to fix.